Arthur Jenkins was a man of routines. Every morning, long before the first rays of Memphis sunshine properly warmed the city, he was already at the grand old Memphis Auditorium. His trusty mop bucket and a worn-out broom were his companions. Arthur, a man in his late 50s, with kind eyes hidden behind spectacles and a perpetually neat uniform, took immense pride in his work. He believed a clean space honored the art performed within it. For years, he had quietly served the auditorium, a silent observer to the parade of events: symphony orchestras, traveling theater groups, high school graduations, and the occasional boxing match. He'd seen them all come and go, polishing the floors they walked on, emptying the trash bins they filled. Most people didn't notice Arthur, and he liked it that way. It allowed him to do his job without fuss, to be a background hum in the grand symphony of the building. But recently, the hum had turned into a vibrant electric buzz. The name on everyone's lips whispered in awe and excitement was Elvis Presley. The young man, still fresh from his meteoric rise, was scheduled for a series of rehearsals, and then a string of shows at the auditorium. The energy around the place was different now. Teenagers loitered outside, and inside the air itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Arthur, for all his quiet demeanor, had a soul deeply rooted in music. He'd grown up listening to the blues wail from juke joints, and the gospel swell from church choirs. He appreciated true talent, the kind that came from a gut, from a place of raw feeling. He'd heard Elvis on the radio, of course, the way his voice moved, the way it just felt right. It was music that made you want to move, to feel. He knew the rules. During rehearsals, staff, not directly involved, were supposed to stay clear. Security was tight, and the artists needed their space to work, to experiment, to sometimes mess up without an audience. Arthur understood this. He was a professional. Yet the temptation... The first day Elvis's band set up, the sound started to filter through the thick walls. A guitar riff, a drum beat. Then that unmistakable voice, not yet in full performance mode, but raw, powerful, experimenting. Arthur found himself slowing down, his sweeping near the main hall doors. Just for a moment, he thought, just to hear a little clearer. He discovered a small crack in the double doors leading to the main stage area, a tiny flaw in the grand oak. It was barely visible, but if he pressed his ear close, he could hear it as if he were right there. He'd tell himself it was just a quick listen, a reward for scrubbing the restrooms until they gleamed. He wasn't watching, not really, just listening. The music was intoxicating. He heard Scotty Moore's intricate guitar work, Bill Black's steady rhythmic bass, DJ Fontana's crisp drums, and then Elvis. He wasn't just singing. He was feeling every note, trying different phrasing, sometimes stopping to talk to the band, sometimes just humming to himself. It was a revelation for Arthur. He saw the dedication, the hard work that went into making such magic look effortless. Every day Arthur found himself drawn back to that crack in the door. 5 minutes would stretch to 10, then 15. He'd be on break or just finishing a section, and he'd find himself gravitating toward the sound. He never stepped foot into the main hall during these times. He was too disciplined for that, too respectful of the rules. But his presence, his quiet, listening presence, was still a breach. One afternoon, the music was particularly captivating. Elvis was working on a new song, a slow bluesy number that tugged at Arthur's soul. He closed his eyes, leaning against the cold wall, completely lost in the melody. He imagined the lights, the crowds, but mostly he just felt the pure, unadulterated joy of the music washing over him. It was a brief escape from the mundane reality of his life, a moment of pure, unblemished beauty. He didn't hear the footsteps approaching, didn't feel the sudden chill of someone standing over him. His entire world was sound, a velvet smooth voice, reaching out and holding him captive. He was smiling, a small private smile of contentment. Then a voice, cold and sharp, cut through the melody, like a broken record. "Mr. Jenkins." Arthur's eyes snapped open. The smile vanished, replaced by sudden dread. Standing over him, arms crossed, face grim, was Mr. Peterson, the auditorium manager. And Mr. Peterson did not smile often, especially not at janitors caught loitering during a top-secret Elvis Presley rehearsal. The music still played softly from behind the double doors, a mocking soundtrack to Arthur's sudden chilling realization. He'd been caught. The silence that followed Mr. Peterson's stern address was deafening, amplified by the faint muffled thump of a bass drum from beyond the rehearsal room doors. Arthur felt his heart lurch, a cold wave of fear washing over him. He slowly straightened up, pushing his spectacles higher on his nose, his gaze falling to his polished shoes. He couldn't meet Mr. Peterson's eyes. "Mr. Jenkins," Mr. Peterson repeated, his voice lower this time, but no less formidable. "Do you care to explain why you're not only loitering during a private rehearsal, but also pressed against the door like a common eavesdropper?" Arthur swallowed hard. His throat felt dry, constricted. I apologize, Mr. Peterson. I wasn't loitering, sir. I was just on my way to the storage closet, and I heard the music." He knew it sounded like a flimsy excuse, even to his own ears. Mr. Peterson's thin lips tightened. "The storage closet is in the opposite direction, Mr. Jenkins, and frankly, your posture suggested more than a passing interest in the sound of music." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "We have very strict rules about unauthorized personnel during these sessions. You know that, don't you?" Arthur nodded mutely. He did know. He knew the rules backward and forward, and he had broken them. Not with malice, not with any intention of causing harm or disruption, but simply because the pull of the music had been too strong to resist. He thought back to earlier in the week, when he'd first stumbled upon that perfect listening spot. It was a small, dusty ventilation shaft in the hallway adjacent to the stage. If he carefully propped open the access panel, the sound was crystal clear, almost as if he were in the room. He could see a sliver of the stage, too, a glimpse of Elvis in his raw working glory. He remembered watching Elvis then, not just listening. He'd seen him in a simple t-shirt, sweat glistening on his brow, his hair a little disheveled from running his hands through it. He wasn't the polished performer yet, but a diligent artist, focused, passionate, sometimes frustrated, sometimes triumphant. Arthur had watched him stop the band, adjust a lyric, try a different chord, then finally nail it. The way Elvis's face lit up when a piece finally clicked, the way he moved even in rehearsal, that subtle sway of his hips, the tap of his foot, it was pure, unadulterated talent. Arthur had seen the real Elvis, not the idol but the craftsman, and it had deepened his admiration 1,000-fold. This was why he kept coming back, risking his job for those few precious minutes of watching art being born. But now, all that silent appreciation had led him to this moment. "Mr. Jenkins," Mr. Peterson's voice cut through his thoughts, sharp as a knife. "This is a serious breach of protocol. Security is paramount. Especially with an artist of Mr. Presley's stature, we cannot have employees disregarding policies, no matter the reason." Arthur finally managed to lift his gaze, meeting Mr. Peterson's unforgiving eyes. "I understand, sir. I truly am sorry it won't happen again." He hoped his sincerity would count for something. He was a good employee, never late, never complained, always went above and beyond. But Mr. Peterson was shaking his head slowly, a grim finality in the gesture. "I'm afraid that's not good enough, Mr. Jenkins. We cannot risk any further security lapses after careful consideration and a review of your actions this past week." He paused, his gaze hardening. "I'm afraid your employment with the Memphis Auditorium is terminated, effective immediately." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Arthur felt a sudden rush of blood to his ears. A dizzying sensation. Terminated. Fired. Just like that for listening to music, sir, he managed, his voice barely a whisper. "Please, Mr. Peterson, I need this job. I have responsibilities." He thought of his granddaughter Penny, who lived with him. Her small, happy face, her bright eyes. He was her sole guardian. His heart ached at the thought of not being able to provide for her. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jenkins," Mr. Peterson said, a flicker of something almost like regret in his eyes. But it vanished quickly. "My decision is final. You may collect your personal belongings from your locker. Your final paycheck will be mailed to you." Turned as if to dismiss Arthur, his attention already shifting to the next task, the next problem. Arthur felt a crushing weight settle on his chest. It wasn't just the job, though. That was devastating enough. It was the humiliation, the feeling of being discarded, made irrelevant, all for a few moments of stolen beauty. He watched Mr. Peterson walk away, his back ramrod straight. The music from the rehearsal room had stopped now. Only the distant murmur of voices could be heard. The air suddenly felt cold, hollow. Arthur stood there. For a long moment, the scent of fresh polish and stale popcorn, smells that had always comforted him, now seemed to mock his failure. Turned slowly. His shoulders slumped and walked toward the staff locker room. Each step felt heavy like lead. Could feel the eyes of a passing stagehand on him, a quick glance, then away. Everyone knew about Mr. Peterson's strictness. Everyone knew that once he made a decision, it was final. As Arthur opened his locker, he could still hear in his mind the echo of Elvis's voice, the raw, passionate sound from the rehearsal. He loved that music, and now because of it he was out of a job. His future, which had been simply routine, was now terrifyingly uncertain. He pulled out his worn lunchbox and his old coat, the weight of them feeling heavier than usual, like symbols of his sudden unemployment. He took one last look around the familiar, now alien hallway, then walked out of the Memphis Auditorium, leaving behind the music and the only job he had known for the past 15 years. The walk home felt endless, each step a heavy reminder of Arthur's new grim reality. The once familiar streets of Memphis seemed to mock him, the vibrant hum of the city a stark contrast to the hollow emptiness inside him. Clutched his worn lunchbox like a life raft. Though it offered no comfort, he was fired, unemployed, and it all felt so surreal, yet painfully real. His mind replayed the scene with Mr. Peterson. The sharp words, the unyielding gaze. He knew Mr. Peterson was just doing his job, enforcing rules. But couldn't there have been a warning, a second chance? Arthur had always been a dedicated, loyal employee. He'd never even taken a sick day unless absolutely necessary. His chest tightened with a mix of shame and despair. How would he tell Penny? His granddaughter was the light of his life, a bright, curious 7-year-old bundle of energy. Her parents, his son and daughter-in-law, had been gone for 2 years now. Taken too soon by a sudden illness, Arthur had stepped up without hesitation, determined to provide Penny with a stable, loving home. The janitorial job, modest as it was, had been his anchor, his means of keeping their small world afloat. He thought of the bills, the rent, Penny's school supplies, the weekly groceries. Every penny had been accounted for, a tightrope walk between income and expenses. Now the rope had been cut. When he finally reached his small, 2-bedroom house, the porch swing creaked gently in the afternoon breeze. It was quiet. Penny was still at school. Pushed open the front door, the familiar scent of lemon polish and old books doing little to comfort him. He went straight to the kitchen, putting his lunchbox down on the worn table. He stared at it, then slowly, meticulously cleaned it out, wiping away every crumb, every speck of dust. It was a reflex, a habit of a lifetime, but today it felt like a pointless ritual. He sank into a chair, the linoleum cool against his arms. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the rising panic. He was too old, he thought, to find another good job quickly. Who would hire a man pushing 60 who had just been fired? The stigma would stick. He remembered the glimpse he'd had of Elvis earlier during that last forbidden peak. The singer had been laughing, joking with his bandmates, his charisma radiating even in rehearsal. Elvis hadn't known, hadn't seen. He was too busy creating the music that had cost Arthur his livelihood. Arthur felt no resentment towards Elvis, only a pang of wistful irony. The very thing he loved. The music had been his undoing. When Penny burst through the door an hour later, her bright smile and excited chatter about her day at school almost broke Arthur's composure. He forced a smile back, trying to appear normal. "Grandpa, what are we having for dinner? Can we read my new library book tonight?" she chirped, dropping her worn satchel by the door. "Of course, sweet pea," Arthur said, his voice a little hoarse. He hugged her tightly, burying his face in her soft hair, inhaling the comforting scent of sunshine and childhood. He had to be strong for her. He would find a way, but as the days bled into a week, then, too, the reality became harsher. Arthur meticulously scanned the job ads in the newspaper. He walked to every shop, every office building in his neighborhood, asking if anyone needed help. Most places said no, not hiring, or had already found someone. A few promised to keep his resume on file. A polite dismissal. He started doing odd jobs for neighbors, fixing a leaky faucet here, raking leaves there. The small amounts of money barely covered their daily needs. He dipped into his meager savings, watching the numbers dwindle with a growing knot in his stomach. Penny, observant as only children can be, started to notice. She asked why Grandpa seemed so tired. Why they weren't going to the ice cream parlor anymore. "Just saving up for something special, sweet pea," he'd tell her, trying to make his voice sound light. But the lies tasted bitter. The memory of the music from the auditorium was a constant companion, sometimes a comfort, sometimes a source of quiet sorrow. He missed the rhythm of his old job, the sense of purpose. He missed being around the energy of a place where art was made. Most of all, he missed the quiet moments when he could listen to the music, that brief stolen escape. He hadn't seen Elvis's shows. He couldn't bring himself to. The thought of being so close to the auditorium, the place that had been his second home for so long, and not being able to enter, was unbearable. He heard the buzz on the radio, saw the newspaper headlines about Elvis's sold-out performances, the screaming fans. He was happy for Elvis, truly, but a part of him felt a profound loneliness. Like a forgotten chord in a grand melody, one quiet afternoon, Arthur sat on his porch, staring out at the small, overgrown garden. Penny was napping inside. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the distant sounds of city life. He felt defeated, his spirit worn thin. He had always been a man who believed in hard work and honesty. He had never imagined he would find himself in such a predicament, all because of a moment of weakness, a moment of surrendering to the intoxicating power of music. He closed his eyes, picturing the stage inside the auditorium, the lights, the phantom presence of Elvis, and the music that had cost him everything. He felt a tear trickle down his cheek. He had no idea that at that very moment, miles away, the man who sang those songs was about to discover the quiet tragedy of Arthur Jenkins and would not rest until he made it right. The next day, rehearsals for Elvis's new string of shows picked up their usual frenetic pace. The auditorium was a hive of activity. Lights were adjusted, sound systems tweaked, and instruments tuned. Elvis himself was in the middle of it all, a whirlwind of energy and charisma pushing his band to achieve perfection. But as the morning wore on, a small, almost imperceptible feeling began to niggle at Elvis. He was a creature of habit in many ways and observant of his surroundings. He knew the faces of his bandmates, his road crew, the regular security guards, even the cleaning staff. He had a knack for remembering people, for seeing them as individuals, not just parts of the machinery that supported his career. He'd always appreciated the quiet presence of the old janitor, Arthur. He'd noticed him working early mornings, polishing the grand entrance, always with a respectful nod and a soft, "Good morning, Mr. Presley." Elvis, who often felt a strange kind of loneliness in the whirlwind of fame, appreciated the genuine, unassuming nature of someone like Arthur. Arthur never asked for an autograph, never tried to push a demo tape. He just did his job, a silent, steady force in the background. Today, though, Arthur wasn't there. Elvis ran through Heartbreak Hotel for the third time, but his focus felt a little off. He stopped mid-song, waving to Scotty Moore to hold it. "Hey, where's that old fella, the janitor?" Elvis called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous hall. "The one who always cleans up early, Arthur, I think his name is." Scotty shrugged, tuning his guitar. "Haven't seen him. Maybe he's got the day off." Or transferred to another building," added Bill Black, casually plucking his bass. Elvis frowned. It didn't sit right with him. Arthur was always there. "No, he's always here, rain or shine. Did anyone see him yesterday?" A stagehand walking by with a coil of cable hesitated. Well, sir, Mr. Jenkins, he's not working." Shut up. "What do you mean, not working here anymore?" He walked over, his face etched with concern. "Did he quit?" "Is he sick?" The stagehand looked uncomfortable, glancing around. He lowered his voice. Mr. Peterson was the no-nonsense, by-the-book auditorium manager. Elvis had seen him in action, a man who valued rules above all else. "Pecco, why, what happened?" The stagehand stammered, clearly reluctant to get involved. "Well, sir, he was caught. Listening in on your rehearsals, against the rules. You know Mr. Peterson? He's relief washing over his face. He was fired for listening. The idea seemed absurd, cruel, even. He thought of all the people who tried to break into his rehearsals, the reporters and pushy fans. Arthur was just a quiet man who appreciated music." "That's just it, Mr. Presley," the stagehand continued, seeing the anger simmering in Elvis's eyes. "He wasn't trying to cause trouble, just listening. He loves your music. He'd always stop for a minute, when he thought no one was watching. Never got in the way." Elvis ran a hand through his hair. His brow furrowed deeply. This was wrong, so incredibly wrong. He remembered Arthur's quiet nods, the way he would sometimes hum along softly to a tune while cleaning. He hadn't seen it as a security breach, but as a silent compliment. "Where's Mr. Peterson?" Elvis demanded, his voice low but carrying a sudden dangerous edge that made the stagehand flinch. "He's in his office, Mr. Presley," the stagehand quickly offered. Elvis didn't say another word. He turned on his heel and strode purposefully towards the manager's office. His band members exchanged nervous glances. They knew that look. When Elvis got that look, it meant he was serious, and he was usually right. He burst into Mr. Peterson's office without knocking. Mr. Peterson, who was poring over some paperwork, looked up, startled. "Mr. Presley, to what do I owe this unexpected visit?" he asked, forcing a polite smile. "Arthur Jenkins," Elvis stated, cutting straight to the chase, his voice devoid of any pleasantries. "You fired him." Mr. Peterson's smile vanished. Yes. A necessary measure, Mr. Presley. As I explained in my report, Mr. Jenkins repeatedly breached security protocol by attempting to eavesdrop on private rehearsals. Rules are rules. Rules. Elvis's voice rose slightly. He was a quiet, decent man, Mr. Peterson. He just liked the music. He wasn't some reporter trying to get a scoop or a fan trying to cause a ruckus. He was a janitor who appreciated a tune. With all due respect, Mr. Presley, Mr. Peterson began, straightening his to maintain order and security. If I make exceptions, where does it end? He understood the policies. He broke them. There are consequences. Elvis leaned forward, placing his hands on Mr. Peterson's desk, his gaze piercing. The consequence is that a good man lost his job, a man who probably needed it more than most. Do you know anything about his situation? Does he have a family? Does he have anyone else to depend on? Mr. Peterson looked uncomfortable. That's not really my concern, Mr. Presley. My concern is the smooth operation of this facility. Well, it's my concern, Elvis shot back, and I want him rehired immediately. Mr. Presley, you cannot dictate my employment, decisions that is highly unprofessional. I simply cannot rehire someone who has proven to be a security risk. Elvis stood up straight, his eyes blazing. He was usually easygoing, but injustice rankled him deeply. Then, fine, he said, his voice cold. If he doesn't get his job back, I'll take my shows somewhere else. I'll tell every artist I know how this auditorium treats its decent, hard-working staff. See how smoothly you operate then. The threat was real and it was devastating. Elvis Presley was the hottest act in the country. Losing him, and potentially other acts because of his influence, would ruin the auditorium's reputation and bottom line. "Now, Mr. Presley, let's not be hasty," Mr. Peterson stammered, suddenly much more conciliatory. "Perhaps there's a misunderstanding. I'm sure we can reconsider." "There's no misunderstanding," Elvis said firmly. "You fired a good man for being a fan, and I intend to fix it. Now tell me, where does Arthur Jenkins live? I want his address, and I want it now." Mr. Peterson, cowed by Elvis's sudden display of steel, quickly began rummaging through files, his usual confident demeanor completely shattered. He knew the power Elvis wielded, not just as a performer, but as a person with a formidable sense of justice. Losing Elvis Presley's business, especially over something as seemingly trivial as a janitor, would be a career-ending disaster. His personnel file. "Yes, here it is," Mr. Peterson mumbled, pulling out a thin folder. He quickly scribbled an address on a notepad and pushed it across the desk to Elvis. "This should be it, his last known address." Elvis snatched the paper, his eyes scanning the handwritten street name. It was in an older, less affluent part of Memphis, a neighborhood Elvis knew well, a neighborhood that reminded him of his own humble beginnings. This only solidified his resolve. "Thank you," Elvis said, his tone still cool. Leaving no room for further argument, he turned to leave, then paused at the door. "And Mr. Peterson, from now on, I expect my staff and everyone who works in this building to be treated with respect. Understand, Mr. Presley?" "Absolutely." Elvis left the office, his mind already racing. He walked back to the stage where his band members and Colonel Parker were waiting, curiosity etched on their faces. "Well?" Colonel Parker asked, his cigar jutting from the corner of his mouth. "What was that all about, son?" That manager looked like he'd seen a ghost. "He fired Arthur, the janitor, for listening to us rehearse," Elvis explained, holding up the slip of paper. "I told him he was wrong, and I told him to give me Arthur's address. I'm going to find him." Colonel Parker blinked, then adjusted his Stetson hat. "Now, hold on, son. You want to go chasing after a janitor. We've got rehearsals, we've got shows. You're Elvis Presley. You can't just go knocking on doors like some traveling salesman." "Colonel, this isn't about being Elvis Presley," Elvis said, his voice firm, leaving no room for debate. "This is about what's right. That man didn't do anything wrong. He just loved the music, and he lost his job because of it. That's not right." Scotty Moore stepped forward, a sympathetic look on his face. He seemed like a good fella, quiet, but always polite. "Even Scotty remembers him. He was a good man. And I'm going to make this right." Colonel Parker sighed, knowing when Elvis was set on something there was no stopping him. "All right, but you're not going alone. This is Memphis, son. And you're Elvis Presley. We'll send someone to check the address first. Your road manager maybe, or a trusted security man, just to make sure." Jingley agreed. He understood the need for caution. He might be determined, but he wasn't reckless. "All right, but I want it done fast, as soon as rehearsal is over." The next few hours of rehearsal felt unusually long for Elvis. His mind kept drifting to Arthur, wondering what he was doing, how he was managing. Was he worried, scared? Elvis felt a gnawing sense of responsibility, even though he hadn't been directly involved in the firing. He was the reason Arthur had been listening, the reason he'd been caught. He couldn't just stand by. As soon as the last chord faded, Elvis was off the stage. "All right, who's going?" he asked, looking at his road manager, Bob, and one of his security guards, a burly but kind man named Gus. "Gus and I will head over right now, Bob said, taking the address from Elvis. "We'll be discreet. We'll just confirm the address. Maybe try to talk to him if he's there. See if he needs anything immediate." "No," Elvis said, a sudden thought striking him. "Don't say anything. Just confirm the address. And ask his neighbor quietly if he seems all right. Don't tell anyone who you are or why you're there. I want to tell him myself," then nodded. They understood. This was personal for Elvis. The wait was agonizing. Elvis tried to distract himself, talking to the band, signing a few autographs for waiting fans at the stage door, but his mind kept returning to Arthur. He ate dinner, but the food tasted like ash. He paced his hotel suite, looking out over the twinkling lights of Memphis. Finally, late that evening, Bob called. "Okay, we found it. It's a small place. Looks a bit rundown. But he's there, or at least his granddaughter came to the door when we pretended to be canvassing for a local charity. Said her grandpa Arthur was home, didn't ask too many questions." Elvis felt a surge of relief, mixed with a deeper sense of urgency. His granddaughter, he has family. The stagehand hadn't mentioned that. It added another layer of urgency. He had a child depending on him. "Good," Elvis said, a determined glint in his eye. "Tell the driver to have the car ready first thing in the morning, and don't tell anyone where I'm going. Not even the colonel. Yet this is something I need to do myself." Bob hesitated. "Are you sure it's not exactly safe, just showing up like that?" "I'm sure, Bob," Elvis said firmly. "I won't rest until this is right. This isn't about being a celebrity. It's about being a decent human being." He hung up the phone, a plan forming in his mind. He wasn't just going to get Arthur his job back. He was going to do something more. Something that would truly show Arthur and himself that kindness mattered, that human connection was more important than rules and regulations. He would make sure Arthur knew his appreciation, for music was something to be cherished, not punished. He wanted to give Arthur back his dignity, and then some. The days since Arthur's firing had been a blur of worry and disappointment. He tried everything: newspaper ads, walking door to door, even asking old acquaintances if they knew of any openings. Each rejection, each sympathetic glance chipped away at his spirit. His small savings account was dwindling faster than he'd anticipated, a constant nagging worry in the back of his mind. Penny, his sweet granddaughter, was the only thing that kept him going. He tried to hide his struggles from her to maintain a semblance of normalcy. They still read stories. She still helped him with his small chores, and they still laughed at her silly jokes. But Arthur could feel the tension in his shoulders, the constant knot in his stomach. He was a proud man, and asking for help was something he'd always avoided. Now he was rapidly running out of options. It was a Tuesday afternoon, gray and overcast, matching Arthur's mood perfectly. Penny was home from school, playing quietly with her doll in the living room. Arthur was in the kitchen, nursing a cup of weak coffee, staring out at the rain-streaked window. He was trying to figure out how to make their last few dollars stretch until the end of the week. Suddenly, a loud, insistent knocking echoed from the front door. Arthur frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone. Most of his neighbors usually just called out from their porches. He rarely had visitors. His first thought was a bill collector, or perhaps someone from social services. Though he'd tried his best to keep his situation quiet, he pushed himself up from the table, his joints protesting. Penny looked up from her doll, her bright eyes wide with curiosity. "Who is it, Grandpa?" "I don't know, sweet pea," Arthur mumbled, making his way to the door. Peered through the small peephole, but it was smudged, and all he could make out was a tall, dark silhouette. He hesitated, a ripple of unease running through him. He slowly unlatched the lock and pulled the door open a crack, peering out, and then his world seemed to tilt on its axis. Standing on his humble porch, framed by the overcast sky, was a figure that Arthur recognized instantly, yet couldn't believe his eyes. He wore dark slacks, a crisp white shirt, and a stylish jacket. His hair was slicked back in that familiar, iconic way, and those eyes, those famous, captivating eyes, were looking directly at him. It was Elvis Presley. Arthur stared, speechless. He felt a sudden surge of dizziness, his hand gripping the door frame for support. Was he dreaming? Was this some cruel joke? He must be losing his mind from all the stress. Elvis offered a small, polite smile, though there was a hint of concern in his expression. "Mr. Jenkins?" he asked, his voice softer, less booming than it was on stage, but still carrying that unmistakable timbre. "My name's Elvis Presley. I apologize for showing up unannounced, but may I have a word with you?" Arthur could only manage a choked sound somewhere between a gasp and a cough. He slowly opened the door, wider still, unable to fully process what was happening. Elvis Presley on his porch. In his neighborhood, Penny, meanwhile, had crept up behind Arthur, peeking around his leg. When she saw Elvis, her eyes grew round as saucers. She didn't fully grasp who he was, but she recognized him from the newspaper and the excited chatter of her school friends. "Grandpa, it's the singing man," she whispered, her small voice full of awe. Elvis's gaze softened when he saw the little girl. He offered her a gentle smile. "Hello there," he said. "Mr. Presley?" Arthur finally managed to stammer, finding his voice, though it was still hoarse with shock. What on earth are you doing here?" Elvis stepped inside, his presence filling the small entryway. He looked around the modest living room, taking in the worn furniture, the well-loved toys, the signs of a struggling but clean and cared-for home. He noted the careful mending on the sofa, the faded but cherished family photographs on the mantelpiece. "Mr. Jenkins," Elvis began, his voice serious now, "I came because I heard what happened at the auditorium about you being let go." Arthur felt a fresh wave of shame wash over him. He lowered his gaze. "Sir, I know I made a mistake. I shouldn't have been there. Rules are rules." "Rules are rules, sure," Elvis conceded, his voice firm but not unkind. "But sometimes rules are a bit blind. You aren't doing any harm, Mr. Jenkins. You aren't trying to spy or cause trouble. You were just appreciating the music. I know that." Arthur looked up, surprised by the genuine understanding in Elvis's eyes. "When I found out," Elvis continued, I was mad that a good man, a hard-working man, lost his job for something so harmless. It wasn't right, Mr. Jenkins. And I want to make it right, but I was already told there's no going back, Mr. Peterson." "Mr. Peterson and I had a talk," Elvis interjected, a hint of steel in his voice. "A very firm talk. He now understands that such decisions have consequences, not just for the employee, but for the entire operation. I made it very clear that I would not tolerate such unfair treatment of good people." Arthur just stared. He still couldn't quite comprehend that Elvis Presley, the biggest star in the world, was standing in his living room fighting for his old job. "So," Elvis said, taking a step closer, his expression earnest, "I came to offer you your job back at the Memphis Auditorium. I've already spoken to Mr. Peterson. You can return tomorrow if you wish, and I assure you there will be no repercussions, no hard feelings from anyone. You'll be treated with the respect you deserve." Arthur felt a sudden tightness in his throat, a rush of unexpected emotion. Relief flooded him, so powerful. It almost buckled his knees. His job he could provide for Penny again. The weight that had been crushing him for weeks suddenly lifted, replaced by a surge of overwhelming gratitude. Tears welled up in Arthur's eyes, hot and stinging. He quickly wiped them away with the back of his hand. "Mr. Presley," he choked out, his voice thick with emotion, I don't know what to say. That's incredibly kind of you. More than kind. Thank you. Thank you so much." Elvis watched him, a gentle smile returning to his face. He extended a hand, and Arthur, still in a daze, shook it. Elvis's grip was firm, warm, and genuine. But as Arthur stood there flooded with relief, Elvis wasn't finished. He had a deeper, more profound offer to make, an offer that would change Arthur's life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Elvis released Arthur's hand, his smile thoughtful. "Please, Mr. Jenkins, don't thank me yet." He glanced at Penny, who was still peeking from behind her grandfather's leg, her tiny hand clutching the hem of Arthur's trousers. "And this little lady here," he added with a soft chuckle. "She's what really matters, isn't she?" Arthur nodded, his throat still tight. "Yes, sir. Penny is everything." Elvis knelt down slightly, getting closer to Penny's eye level. "Hello, Penny. Are you a fan of music?" Penny, emboldened by his gentle tone, nodded shyly. "Yes, sir. Grandpa sings to me sometimes." "Well, that's wonderful," Elvis said, his gaze returning to Arthur. "Mr. Jenkins, getting your old job back at the auditorium. That's just the first part of what I came to talk about." Arthur blinked, confused. "The first part?" Elvis stood up, his expression serious again. "You told Mr. Peterson you just loved the music. And I saw how you watched, how you listened. You weren't just cleaning, you truly appreciated what we were doing. You understood." He'd paused, looking around Arthur's small home again, his gaze lingering on a framed, faded photo of a younger Arthur and a woman, presumably his late wife. He saw the struggle, the quiet dignity, the pride that kept this humble home so clean and neat. "Let me ask you something, Mr. Jenkins," Elvis continued, his voice dropping slightly, almost conspiratorial. "Do you really want to go back to sweeping floors, to being stuck behind the scenes, only catching glimpses through cracks in doors?" Arthur looked down at his worn, work-roughened hands. The truth was, no, he didn't. He needed the job desperately, but the idea of going back to the same routine, the same invisibility, felt heavy after this unexpected visit. I need a job, Mr. Presley," Arthur said, his voice quiet. "Any job to provide for, Penny. And you will, Mr. Jenkins," Elvis said, his voice suddenly full of conviction. "A much better one. One where you don't just hear the music, but you're a part of making it happen up close." Arthur looked up, a bewildered expression on his face. "I don't understand, sir." Elvis took a deep breath, his eyes shining with an idea that had solidified in his mind. During his agonizing wait, "Mr. Jenkins, I travel constantly. We're always on the road, moving from one city to the next, setting up shows, tearing them down. It's a lot of work. And I need good people around me, reliable people, people I can trust. You'd be part of the team." Arthur's jaw dropped. He stared at Elvis, speechless. A general assistant on Elvis Presley's road crew, traveling, being part of the music. It sounded like a wild, impossible dream. "You'd get a good salary, Mr. Jenkins," Elvis went on, seeing the shock in Arthur's eyes. "More than you made at the auditorium, enough to take care of Penny properly. All expenses paid on the road, of course, and when we're not touring, you'd have paid time off to be with your granddaughter." Arthur's mind reeled. He pictured Penny's happy face, the things he could finally get for her, the worries that would finally lift. But beyond the money, it was the offer itself, the dignity, the respect, the chance to be connected to the music he loved so much, not as a hidden listener, but as an integral part of the show. "Mr. Presley," Arthur finally managed to choke out, his voice thick with emotion. I'm just a janitor. I don't know anything about being a roadie or a general assistant." Elvis smiled reassuringly. "Mr. Jenkins, you know about hard work. You know about being reliable. You know how to keep things orderly. And you know about music. That's more than enough. We'll teach you the rest. You're a good man, Mr. Jenkins. I saw that in the way you did your job, and in the way you appreciated ours. I need good men around me." Arthur felt tears streaming down his face, now unashamed. It wasn't just a job offer. It was a lifeline. It was dignity. It was a recognition of his quiet passion. It was a second chance, a new beginning, better than he could have ever dreamed. He looked at Penny, who was now smiling, sensing her grandfather's overwhelming emotion, sensing that something good, something truly special, was happening. "Mr. Presley," Arthur finally managed to say, his voice shaking, I accept with all my heart, thank you. Thank you for seeing me, for truly seeing me." Elvis nodded, a genuine warmth in his eyes. "It's my pleasure, Mr. Jenkins. Welcome to the team. We leave for the next leg of the tour in 3 days. My manager will be in touch with all the details, your first paycheck, and everything you need to prepare. Get some rest, now, and tell Penny to expect some new adventures. With a final kind nod, Elvis turned and quietly left Arthur's house, leaving behind a man whose life had just been turned upside down in the most wonderfully unexpected way possible. Arthur stood there, tears still flowing, clutching his granddaughter, a silent prayer of gratitude in his heart. The music had taken something from him, but Elvis Presley, the man, had given him back so much more. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind of disbelief and frantic preparation for Arthur. True to Elvis's word, a respectful but efficient representative from Colonel Parker's office arrived the very next morning. The man, a polite fellow named Mr. Thompson, handed Arthur a substantial advance on his salary. More money than Arthur had seen at once in years. He explained the travel arrangements, the schedule, and assured Arthur that a small, comfortable room would always be provided for him on tour, close to Elvis's own quarters, but separate enough for privacy. The first thing Arthur did was pay off his overdue bills, a wave of immense relief washing over him as he wrote out the checks. Then he took Penny shopping for new clothes, something she desperately needed. Seeing her face light up at the new dresses and sturdy shoes brought tears to his eyes. He also set aside a significant portion of the money for her future, a nest egg he could only dream of before. Explaining his new job to Penny was easier than he expected. "Grandpa's going to travel with the singing man," he told her, trying to simplify it. "I'll be helping him with his shows, making sure everything runs smoothly." Penny's eyes widened. "Like a helper elf," Arthur chuckled. "Something like that, sweet pea. And when Grandpa's away, Mrs. Henderson next door has kindly agreed to look after you. We'll talk on the phone every night, and I'll be back as often as I can." Mrs. Henderson, a kind older woman, was thrilled to help, especially after Arthur explained his new stable income meant he could pay her fairly. On the day of departure, a sleek black car pulled up to Arthur's curb, a stark contrast to his humble home. Arthur, dressed in a new, sensible suit he'd bought, felt a flutter of nerves mixed with intense excitement. He hugged Penny tightly, promising to write, to call, and to bring her something special from every city. Inside the car, Elvis's road manager, Bob, greeted him warmly. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Jenkins. Elvis is looking forward to having you." The journey to the airport, then the private plane flight. It was all a dizzying, luxurious blur for Arthur. He'd never flown before, never imagined such comforts. He watched the world shrink beneath them. A silent marvel. When they arrived at their first tour stop, a bustling city hundreds of miles away, Arthur was immediately swept into the organized chaos of a touring rock and roll show. He was introduced to the rest of Elvis's crew, the musicians, the technicians, the other roadies, the security detail. They were a diverse group, but they all shared a common dedication to Elvis and his music. Most of them seemed to already know about Arthur's story and offered him nods of welcome and quiet words of support. "All right, Mr. Jenkins," Bob said, handing him a clipboard. "Today we need to help unload the equipment, set up the instrument stands, and make sure Elvis's dressing room is exactly as he likes it. Just follow Jimmy here. He'll show you the ropes." Arthur was a fast learner. He might be older, but he was strong and meticulous. He listened carefully, observed everything, and quickly grasped the rhythm of the crew. He wasn't the fastest, but he was thorough and reliable. He helped carry cases, untangle cables, arrange microphones, and even polished Elvis's special guitar. Something he did with quiet reverence. Elvis, despite his immense fame and demanding schedule, made sure to check in with Arthur frequently. He'd often seek him out patched, "Settling in all right?" "Yes, Mr. Presley," Arthur would reply, always formal, always respectful. "Everything is going well. Thank you again for this opportunity." Elvis would just smile. "No, thank you, Arthur. It's good to have you." One evening, Arthur found himself standing in the wings, just out of sight as Elvis took the stage. The roar of the crowd was deafening, a wave of adoration that physically vibrated through the floorboards. The lights exploded, the band launched into their opening number, and Elvis, radiating pure energy, burst into song. Arthur watched, mesmerized. He had heard Elvis rehearse, seen the raw effort. He watched as Elvis moved, as his voice soared, as he captivated every single person in that vast arena. And Arthur was part of it. He had helped set up the stage, made sure the mic was perfectly placed, that the water bottle was waiting back. He wasn't just listening through a crack in the door anymore. He was here officially, part of the machinery that brought this incredible music to life. A quiet smile spread across Arthur's face. He felt a deep sense of contentment, a feeling of belonging he hadn't realized he craved. The music, the very thing that had cost him his old life, had now led him to a life he'd never dared to dream of. He watched Elvis on stage, lost in the performance, and for the first time in a long time, Arthur Jenkins felt truly, wonderfully, and completely at home. As the weeks turned into months, Arthur Jenkins became an indispensable, if quiet, fixture in Elvis Presley's touring entourage. He wasn't a flamboyant character like some of the other roadies, nor was he part of the inner circle of close friends and family. But he was something equally, if not more important. He was a steady, reliable presence, a source of calm amidst the constant chaos of life on the road. Elvis often found himself seeking out Arthur's quiet company. After a particularly draining show or a difficult meeting with Colonel Parker, he might wander backstage past the jubilant band members and the frenetic crew and find Arthur meticulously organizing a storage trunk or carefully polishing Elvis's stage shoes. "Arthur," Elvis would say, his voice tired but appreciative. "How's it going back here?" "Just making sure everything's ready for tomorrow, Mr. Presley," Arthur would reply, never missing a beat in his work. He never pushed, never pried. He simply answered the question, letting Elvis lead the conversation. Sometimes Elvis would simply sit on an overturned case nearby, watching Arthur work the silence, a welcome balm to his overstimulated senses. He found Arthur's quiet diligence soothing. Arthur was a man rooted in reality, grounded, unaffected by the glamour and demands of fame. He just saw the job, and he did it with dedication. Other times they would talk, not about music strategy or business deals, but about simple things. Arthur would share stories about his garden back home, or funny anecdotes about Penny's latest antics. Elvis, in turn, would sometimes talk about his love for gospel music, or the pressure of being constantly in the public eye, things he rarely discussed with anyone else. Arthur never judged, never offered unsolicited advice. He just listened, truly listened, with an empathetic understanding that Elvis cherished. "It's good to have someone around who just sees things clearly," Elvis once confessed to Arthur late one night after a particularly tumultuous show. "No agendas, no hangers-on, just honest work." Arthur simply nodded, continuing to pack away a costume. Truth usually shines through, Mr. Presley, in music and in people. Arthur never asked for favors, never gossiped, and never tried to leverage his proximity to the king for personal gain. He was just Arthur, the man who quietly, efficiently made sure things ran smoothly. His presence was a quiet anchor for Elvis, a reminder of the simpler, more authentic world outside the gilded cage of celebrity. His own life, meanwhile, had been transient worry. He had moved them into a slightly larger, nicer house in a safer neighborhood with a small yard where Penny could play. He called her every night, listening to her excited chatter about school and friends. He made sure to fly home for her birthdays, for Christmas, and whenever there was a significant break in the tour schedule. He even bought her a new bicycle, something he could never have afforded before. The old weight of anxiety had lifted from Arthur's shoulders, replaced by a quiet contentment. He felt useful, respected, and for the first time in a long time, truly happy. He was part of something grand, something that brought joy to millions, and he played a vital, if unseen, role in it. One evening, during a show in a new city, a critical piece of stage equipment malfunctioned, just minutes before Elvis was due on stage. Panic erupted, baged. Technicians scrambled. But the problem seemed complex. Arthur, standing quietly nearby, had been observing the technicians. He'd noticed a small, almost invisible loose connection earlier when he was tidying. He rarely interfered with technical matters, but his janitorial eye for detail, honed over decades, recognized the issue. "Excuse me, sir," Arthur said quietly to the head technician, who was on the verge of pulling his hair out. "Have you checked the connection on the power splitter, just behind the main amplifier? The cable seemed a little loose when I wiped it down earlier." The technician, desperate, scoffed. A janitor knows about power splitters, but in his desperation, there it was. A slightly loose connection that had been overlooked in the rush. He tightened it, flicked a switch, and the equipment hummed back to life. A collective sigh of relief swept through the crew. Elvis, who had been watching, walked over to Arthur. "Arthur," he said, a genuine smile of admiration on his face. "You just saved the show?" Arthur simply shrugged, a faint blush on his cheeks. "Just paying attention, Mr. Presley?" Elvis clapped him on the shoulder. "That, Arthur, is one of your many talents, and I appreciate it more than you know." It was a small moment, unheralded by the roaring crowd, but for Arthur it meant the world. He was seen, truly seen, not just as a worker, but as an essential part of the team, valued for his unique, quiet strengths. And as Elvis walked out onto the stage to thunderous applause, Arthur watched from the wings, a warm sense of pride filling his chest. He was home. Years turned into a steady rhythm of tours, recording sessions, and quiet moments back in Memphis. Arthur Jenkins remained an unwavering presence in Elvis Presley's world. He saw the highs, the screaming fans, the sold-out stadiums. He saw the lows, the exhaustion, the demands, the quiet moments of loneliness that fame could bring even to someone as adored as Elvis. Through it all, Arthur remained the same, diligent, trustworthy, and quietly appreciative. He wasn't just a roadie, he was a silent guardian, a confidant, a friend in the truest, most unassuming sense of the word. Elvis trusted Arthur with things he wouldn't trust many others, with not just equipment, but moments of vulnerability, quiet worries, and dreams. Arthur never betrayed that trust. He was a keeper of secrets. Penny grew up knowing her grandfather traveled the world with one of the biggest stars on the planet. She'd seen pictures, heard stories from her grandfather, and occasionally during a long break in Memphis, she even got to meet Elvis herself. He would always greet her kindly, remember her name, and ask about her school. Penny, in turn, adored him, the kind man who had given her grandfather a new life. Because of Elvis's generosity, Arthur was able to send Penny to a good school, and later even help her with college expenses, fulfilling a dream he once thought impossible. Arthur's life was full now. He was healthy, secure, and had a purpose that resonated deeply with his love for music and his innate desire to be useful. He often thought back to that bleak day he was fired from the auditorium, the crushing despair he felt. It was a stark reminder of how quickly life could change, and how one act of profound kindness could alter everything. He remembered Mr. Peterson, the strict manager. He heard through the grapevine that Mr. Peterson had retired a few years after Arthur's departure, his tenure marked by a quiet efficiency but also a certain stiffness. Arthur held no resentment. He was simply grateful that his path had diverged so dramatically. The magic of Elvis's music never faded for Arthur. He was still the quiet listener, but now he listened from a position of honor and belonging. He saw the passion, the sweat, the dedication that went into every performance. He understood the joy it brought, not just to the audience but to the man on stage, and he knew with a deep satisfaction that he was a small, crucial part of that grand, beautiful creation. In his later years, as Elvis's career evolved and new challenges emerged, Arthur remained steadfast. He was there for the comebacks, the quiet personal struggles, the triumph. He was a rock, a steady presence, always in the background, always ready to lend a hand or just a listening ear. One night, many years after that fateful knock on his door, Arthur stood backstage as Elvis finished F. I as Elvis took his besom, a tidal wave of adoration. It was a silent acknowledgement, a shared understanding, forged through years of trust and mutual respect. As Elvis disappeared into his dressing room, Arthur began his quiet work, organizing the discarded towels, checking the equipment one last time. The arena slowly emptied, the noise settling into a gentle hum. Arthur paused, looking out at the vast empty stage still bathed in the glow of the final spotlights. He thought of that small crack in the auditorium door, the hidden glimpse he once stole, and the heavy despair of being fired. Then he thought of Elvis, standing on his humble porch, offering not just a job but a whole new life. It wasn't just about the money or the travel or the fame by association. It was about pure class, about one man's profound empathy for another. It was about seeing a human being, not just a rule breaker. It was about recognizing that a quiet love for music, for art, for beauty was a quality to be cherished, not punished. Arthur Jenkins, the former janitor, the quiet listener, felt a warmth spread through his chest. He took a deep breath, the lingering scent of performance, of energy, of magic filling his lungs. He was part of this, and it was all thanks to one act of pure, unadulterated class from a man who truly understood the meaning of a lasting melody, not just in song, but in life. He picked up his cleaning cloth, a peaceful smile on his face, ready for the next adventure, a living testament to the power of kindness.